This episode is brought to you by Robinhood. The next generation of investors is already here, and it includes you. That's why Robinhood is creating real, human education resources, truly digestible financial news, and a platform that lets you invest in your own way, on your own terms. Robinhood. Download the app and get started today. Disclosure: investing is risky. Robinhood Financial, LLC.
Empire.
Snyder takes control. And what does that mean exactly for the Washington Football Team? My buddy John Keim and I are going to break it all down for you. What's up, everybody? It's Mike Jones. Thanks for coming back for another episode of the Football Jones podcast. It's a bonus episode. Already this week, we've had a talk with NFLPA president and Cleveland Browns center J.C. Tretter talking about the move from 16 to 17 games. But some other news that came out of the owners' meetings of the week was that the NFL's 32 teams voted to approve Washington owner Daniel Snyder's request for a debt waiver, so that way he could take on more debt and be able to buy out his three partners. If you haven't been paying attention to this storyline, Snyder and his three minority owners have been at odds for roughly the last year. They wanted out. A group of investors from California wanted to buy them out. Snyder tried to block that sale to that group of investors because he wanted to exercise his right of first refusal. It all went to court. There's been a lot of nasty back and forth. But Snyder now received approval. He's buying his three partners out, and that's about 40% of the shares of the team. Snyder and his sister and his mother owned the majority of the stakes in the team, but now Snyder assumes full control. So a lot of people are wondering, what does this mean? As you know, Washington Football Team and Snyder have been in investigation that's been going on for the last year or so, as roughly 40 former female employees have filed complaints in regards to sexual harassment and misconduct and mistreatment. And so the league has been conducting an independent investigation on that. So we're going to talk about how this purchase or taking over the whole stakes of the team, what that has to do with the investigation, and if it means anything. So let's get to it right now with John Keim from ESPN and the John Keim Report, which is also on the Empire Media Network.
Hey, this is Joel Corey from Inside the Cap. I know you're enjoying Football Jones, hosted by Mike Jones, which goes in depth with coaches, executives, players, and NFL insiders. Once you're done with listening to Football Jones, check out my podcast, Inside the Cap, which explains the ins and outs of the NFL salary cap and player contract negotiations. So enjoy Football Jones, Inside the Cap, and other fine products brought to you by Empire Media.
Okay, here he is, my buddy John Keim. Thanks. It's good to have you back on the podcast. Hope your off season's going well. It's been busy, I know, because we had free agency, we've got the draft, and then you throw in a little news about Snyder and his ownership increase. And so I wanted to have you on just to give a little insight, because you were close. You were closer than I am. As a recap, a couple weeks ago, he had applied for the waiver, the debt waiver, so he could buy out his minority owner, the minority three partner owners, and have full control of the team. Him and his family. His sister has a stake. His mother has a stake. And a lot of people were like, "Oh wow, what does this mean?" Because of that investigation and everything. And so here we are. Here, what was your response, your reaction to him getting approval, because the finance committee approved it, and then earlier this week, or yesterday, Wednesday, the rest of the owners voted unanimously to authorize him to buy out the rest of his partners. So what was your reaction to this?
Right. Well, I wasn't surprised that they approved it, because I think once the finance committee, which was made up of owners, like once they did that, you knew that it was going to go down that road. And I think the takes I have is that, first of all, it kind of ends the back and forth court brief filings between Snyder and his minority owners. That will now go away. So the disputes will become not public. And, I think that part is probably for all of us not a bad thing. But I wasn't surprised that they approved them. And, everybody wants to know what it means for the investigation. And as
Right.
I'm sure you've been told, we've always been told that it's separate. But I think it's hard to always separate that, because they know it's out there. And the fact that they approved it unanimously, I think we both know that, and have heard throughout the process, that it was unlikely that they would ever try to force him out, unless, depending on what comes out of that, there may be still something that comes out of there they're like, oh my gosh, that was completely different than what we've heard before. But, all along, I've heard that it would be unlikely for other owners to try and force him out.
Yeah, exactly. And I had heard the same thing, because these guys don't want to get into the business of forcing owners out. People talk about Jerry Richardson, but his was voluntary. But the Snyder thing here, because, like you said, we don't have a smoking gun that ties Snyder to this stuff. Did he know about it? We don't know. Possibly. Wouldn't be surprised if he did. Did he care? We don't know. His stance was that he wasn't paying close enough attention to what was going on in his organization. And I know some of the women who have filed, these complaints and get to him say BS. He
Right.
did know. But as far as the owners are concerned, the other guys, none of those guys are saints. And they wouldn't want to be forced out because of something. We know that the news came out that he had reached a confidentiality settlement with somebody, but as I was told by somebody else in the league, well, he wouldn't be the first,
Right.
rich guy to pay off somebody to be quiet. So if you were hoping that, that we would get clarity on the investigation, or that these owners would reject this thing and, help fuel that investigation, I think your hopes, were up a little high. And like you said, it is separate, but I do agree that I think that if there was real concerning stuff in the eyes of the owners, they probably would not have approved this thing right now if they were going to turn around in a matter of weeks and oust him. So what kind of punishment, say that the investigation comes out and at the very least, there is reports that Snyder knew about this stuff, but just didn't act. Do you have any indication on what kind of punishment he could be looking at?
It seems like everything you hear, and I say everything you hear, it's not coming from the people who decide the punishment.
Right.
So it's more guesswork from people who have been around the league for a while. And so it's really hard to say, but like the things you'll hear is like, a fine. I think people just assume there's going to be a fine, if nothing else. And then it's would the league take away draft picks, or would it more be a suspension for Snyder of some sort? That I don't know, but that's something that people that you hear. That's obviously a possibility, and I think some people kind of expect that. But again, they're not high enough in this to run with that as a source to say league. They expect this. No, it's something that some people when they speculate. That's one thing they wonder about. But I think certainly a fine, if nothing else. I think that would be the baseline that you would expect.
If you even look at, the Robert Kraft situation, I know the prosecutors wound up dropping that, but he didn't receive any type of punishment with
Right.
that. So if Snyder's not involved in something, I think that I've heard basically the same things as you, a fine and or suspension, or maybe just a fine or whatever. We'll see. But if you were thinking that, there's a good chance that he would be out, which I know the women were hoping so. I know that some fans, not because they are just, righteous advocates against.
They just don't like him.
They just don't like the guy. Well, I think your hopes are probably in the wrong place if you were just, thinking that this would get rid of him.
Well, and I think to that point, and like if the owners, because I've had people too ask me this, like, well, wouldn't they take two theories, like, well, he's such a bad owner, wouldn't they want him out? Well, if you just force somebody out because you think he's a bad owner, how many of these owners in this league are going to be now like, there are some franchises who have been really bad for a long time, worse than this team as far as record and all that. So those guys would be sitting there sweating bullets. They're not going to do that for that reason. Now, I know that there are some owners, I've heard this in talking to people, some owners don't like him and would like him out, but there's a difference between wanting him out and then voting him out or forcing him out. And they haven't taken that step. Like even those owners that you hear might not want him, they haven't taken the step of like voting, making a movement to get him out. It's just more, I think they wish he would be out. And I know, because, the other part of it too, Mike, is that some people will say, well, do these other owners like it because like they can, the team's not good, so they can always beat them. Well, no, they don't think. These are businessmen. Right. They want what's like, it's not good for the league to see a half-filled FedEx Field. No. And of that half-filled, to have a quarter, almost half of those fans be opposing fans. It's not good for the league, and they know that. So, now clearly the league's doing well, but this is supposed to be an iconic franchise. You want the health of it to be a lot better. So no, that was not a reason why they want to keep him in there. They're going to keep him in there because they don't want the tables to be turned on them. And that's a lot of it. And again, you have to have, it can't just be, and again, talking to people throughout the summer, a little bit in the fall, just like you're not going to force somebody out because of what you would view as incompetence, because then again, other owners are going to be, under a severe microscope if that's the case. And, they don't want the precedent of that.
Yeah, you're exactly right. Do you think that, okay, so now like these three partners are out of the way. Otherwise, do you think that this changes anything in the operation of the team?
No.
Right. Okay. Because I was gonna say, from everything I've known, Snyder was still the guy calling the shots.
Right.
Anyway, what do you think comes of Snyder now being fully in control of this franchise, then, if anything at all?
That's a good question. I don't know that it changed. The one thing I wonder about too is when you're flying solo with this, what happens with your cash flow? Like that's one reason why they bring on other minority owners or whatever, because it helps improve the cash flow. Right. Does that do anything to that? I don't know. And but that's like, if you're looking for like what's an impact, well, maybe that's it, because it's, there's certainly, they already had the controlling shares. So does anything really happen because of that? I don't know that anything's going to be that different. And, you always hear that he is definitely spending more time away from there. Now you're reachable by phone. So It's not like you can't have an influence. He's just not there as much, but that was true before all this. So I don't know that it's going to have a huge impact. I think what'll have a bigger impact in the future is if this team doesn't win. And if they don't take a bit, that next step this year, and then you go into year 3, and if it's kind of iffy, whatever, that's when you see him start to maybe do some different things like he had, or go back to some things he had done before, which is applying more pressure, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But that's different than gaining full control, because he would have done that anyway. So I don't know that this really changes a whole lot.
Have you been able to see, and this isn't something maybe from afar, I can't tell, you're being up close, have you noticed, has there been any change since that, from what you can tell, since Jason Wright has been on board? I mean, I know they hired Julie Donaldson. I know they hired another director of HR. They have, more, they're trying to move towards more diversity hirings and things like that. But as a whole, has this organization really changed much?
It's hard to say that because we're not in the building. So it's been difficult to know the full impact of that. Where I think the changes are that Jason Wright is clearly more transparent than Bruce Allen ever was. I mean, in his first day, he was more transparent than Bruce Allen ever was. And Bruce Allen would, he was like pulling teeth to get him to talk to you. Jason Wright is happy to do these interviews because he feels like he needs to be more transparent. I know, like, there's some people that I've heard of, like, is he doing too much? And maybe not in the building, but within the league, because he's a lot more transparent than other team presidents.
Mm-hmm.
But this is the way they feel like they need to take the approach, because it has been a brutal, past year for the franchise, but also a few years, just given the animosity by some of the fan base. So I think that's one big difference. And I was talking to Doug Williams about this too. And, he has now become one of Jason Wright's right-hand men. And he was saying that when they get on the Zoom calls, and you brought up diversity, he's like, that's what jumps out to him, is the diversity when you see on the Zoom pictures, and the different faces and whatever, and genders, and that it's just a lot. He's like, I can't believe that another team would be as diverse as we are. So I think, now with that, and I think this is one thing that you go back to the summer. I always go back to the summer, because that's when all this stuff started really gaining steam about the major issues within. We've known about these issues in the organization as far as like the culture, not all the stuff that the Post exposed, but a lot of stuff that was going on, and the need to improve the culture. And one of the things, and talking to people who had been here, was they said, we need more, we meaning Washington needs more diverse voices. And like that, some people felt like it wasn't just diversity in terms of color or gender, whatever, is diversity of thought too.
Right.
So like bringing people in from outside the organization, too often they felt like it was just a promotion. So you're just getting the same recycled ideas. And like, so that's where the Jason Wright impact can be felt, and people coming in from outside having some more. But again, we don't know like how it really is, because we're not there. And you hear that, you hear good things, but again, we're not there to know. And I think that really takes a while. Like, I think it would be incorrect to paint it as it's all different, it's all better now. When it was as tough as it was, then I think it just takes a while to ferret that out and to gain trust in the organization within the organization. So I think that it's a longer process than just a few months goes, but it sounds like, people love Doug Williams. So the fact that he's now more on the business side, I think that helps. People really seem to like Jason Wright. So like, so those are all good things. But again, I think it takes a while to measure that. And as you know, some of the stuff that they're doing, I talked to people who had been here, said, I suggested this and it wasn't listened to, or we talked about this and it wasn't listened to. Well, now it's being listened to because of what's come out. They had no choice.
Yeah, my other question is, and I don't know how much you were able to see of this, but who is Snyder going to hang out with now? Because every year now, he lost Bruce, he lost Larry Hess, he lost Eric Schaefer. Dwight Schrute was always by his side. Those guys are gone now. Yeah. So, like, who's he going to stride down the hill and stand and talk to as he watches practice? Because Larry, Mike, everybody's gone.
All gone. That's Mike. When this was going on last year, when they started getting rid of some of the people, I wondered the same thing.
Right. And
that was before he lost the minority investors. So I don't know. And I know, like, there's some attorneys that are close to him and all that, but they're not. Are they going to be there on a day-to-day basis if he wants to go out to practice, and just hang out? I've wondered the same thing. I don't know, because like, here's the other thing, like the thing you always heard with Dan was he needs that person to pay. Like he's really good about calling these people at 2 a.m. I say really good, but I don't know if that's the right word, but he often would call them at 2 a.m. and just want to talk, or he'd have someone come hang out with them just because he wanted someone to come hang out with them. So I don't know how that's going to play out, because that often, like what the Bruce Allen, the Vinny Serratos, they served as buffers between Dan and the coaching staff and the front office even. And that doesn't, I don't know. I think that's an interesting thing to see how that plays out, but it also, again, he's not there as much anymore. So maybe that's not quite as important as it was before if he has other people around him, whether, again, attorneys or whomever, to offset that. But that's something that's a curiosity for me.
Yeah, because even back when FedEx said they wanted to change they encouraged them to change the name, there was somebody who used to work there, pretty high up. When I talked to them about that, they said, wow, if he's, Dan really doesn't have anybody to go to now.
Right.
If this guy's turned on him. It's
I heard the same quote.
Right. So we probably heard it from the same person.
Probably.
But I mean, it's very fascinating. And so you wonder, okay, maybe from that standpoint, because he's got nobody to bounce anything off of, maybe he will really trust the football people and the business people to run the organization. Now I'm not, we have no way of knowing. And like you said, it's probably going to take some time.
I think if they win,
yeah.
And this is one thing as somebody there who had worked for him said, he likes success. So if you're having success in your department or whatever, then he'll leave you alone. So if they go out this year, they go from 7-9, I guess there's 17 games. Let's say they go to 10-7, which just sounds weird, but let's say you get to 10-7 or something like that, then I think like it keeps him backed off.
Right.
If you go 7-10, now it's going to be like, all right, this third year he's going to be lurking in that background. And if you don't start off well, we've seen what can happen. So I think that will help keep him at bay as well. If he trusts what you're doing and if you're having success, then I think he'll back off or stay in a certain place. But I think it'll be a big key too, because they are looking for another quarterback. In addition, they already got Ryan Fitzpatrick, but that's where he has stepped in the past, as we know. And what does he do there? And like, if you don't get one this year and you have a chance to get one next year, does he want you to go up to move to get this quarterback, or is he going to let you say this is the quarterback we're going to go get?
Last one, because I know that you're very busy today. Since you brought up Ryan Fitzpatrick, I did want to know what your feel was for this franchise after free agency. People have asked me, I can't really get excited about Ryan Fitzpatrick. This is a guy that, he's great for 5 games and then he turns into a pumpkin. You really need to draft somebody and groom him. Yeah, they got another weapon for the offense that helps. Where's your left tackle? Your defense, you got some guys in your secondary. I don't know yet if I believe that this team is way better with Ryan Fitzpatrick. Yes, he can make plays that Alex Smith wasn't, but again, he's got an expiration date on him that always seems to strike at the bad time. But am I wrong? What is your sense?
Well, I will say this, as a reporter, I enjoy having Ryan Fitzpatrick because he's very fun, right? He's an interesting guy. You see the stuff like he's dressing up in Deshaun Jackson's outfits, for God's sake.
Right.
So you're going to come away from every interview with probably something fun to write.
Okay.
So there's that. I think from watching the product on the field a few years ago, in Alex Smith's first year before he got hurt, they're playing the Colts, and the Colts are running a lot of cover 2, and it was all ding, 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 ding. And I think it felt like he had 25 completions for about 100 yards. Not quite the case, but I remember sitting there watching this thinking oh my God, these fans have to watch 3 more years of this.
Right. This
is just boring as all get out.
Kind of like John Beck to Roy Halou.
Oh, yes. Yeah. The San Francisco. Yeah, absolutely. So that. So, now Alex Smith got better throughout that year and it got a little bit different, but he was always going to be a certain style of quarterback. The appreciation for his play was always the things that the danger he kept you out of more than the big plays that he would make.
Right.
Whereas I think with Ryan Fitzpatrick, it's kind of the opposite. And this team, part of why I think people are excited is because the guy is willing to throw the ball.
Right.
And that, that's going to yield a couple things. It could be a more fun offense to watch. I think it's the stat the other day, they've had 2 top 10 offenses in the last 15 years, something ridiculous like that. And that's, whether in points or yards. And they typically are 20th or worse during that time. So that's an area that he can help them with. But I also wonder if you're a defensive coach, if you're Jack Del Rio, you're going to be sitting there worrying, what is he going to do to my defense? Is he going to put them in bad spots? He has cut down on the picks. He feels like he's playing better than he has. And I think when you watch him, there's definitely some of that. But then you still watch him in the red zone. That's where he has more issues. And it's not just a matter of taking a chance on a guy and giving a guy a chance. Sometimes it's a matter of, you didn't see this guy coming, and you force a ball you shouldn't because you didn't see the whole play. So like that's the stuff you have to wonder about too, or what take into consideration is how does it go down in the red zone, because that's where he's had some issues. I do think it'll be more enjoyable. I do think, Mike, what it speaks to is the average quarterback play that has been seen here. I think that's why people they feel like, oh, you got a legitimate passer. But I think the other part of this equation is you need to get another guy in here that you can develop. And because you've got to be able to find a guy that is a legit guy for the future. And that could be hard to find, as we know, but I think that's why their search is not over. I think with the search, once they sign Fitzpatrick, to me, it signaled even more that they want to find another young quarterback because he can be a good mentor. And I think the last thing on Fitzpatrick, that if you're going to get rid of a guy like Alex Smith, I think it's important to bring in a guy that, because the locker room loved Alex Smith, and Alex Smith earned that praise and that trust from them. He was so good in so many areas that weren't going to show up in stats as far as knowledge of the plays and what guys should do and keeping you out of trouble, et cetera, which is a big part of playing quarterback. But he also is a good leader, and Fitzpatrick has those qualities. Guys will like him. So I think that's a good segue to a guy. If you want to get rid of a guy who's a leader, you bring in another guy who's considered a leader. So there's a good and bad with him there, and there always has been with him. You can't make him out to be like, oh my gosh, he's going to suddenly become a Pro Bowl quarterback.
Right.
But I do think it speaks to the level of offense that has not been played here, that people are excited about him because he is willing to throw the ball. And I think if you add more around him, so
he's never made the playoffs, right?
No. And I think he would have last year if Miami had kept him in there, but no, he hasn't. And, and I think this, I don't know. I'd have to go back and look, say this may be his best chance to do that, because right now he is the only guy. Now, if you let's say they drafted somebody in whatever in the first couple rounds, if there's a struggle, he might get bumped again. But right now you're going in there as he's the guy. This may be his best chance to actually do that. And early in his career, he had much more up and down seasons and games and series. And even a couple years ago in Tampa, if you remember, like these guys played Tampa and they moved the ball up and down on this team, but he kept having problems in the red zone, and you kind of knew they were going to happen. And it was like you'd see the Fitz magic from the 20 to 20, and the Fitz tragic was inside the 20. And that's, but he did, he's cut down on the turnovers the last couple of years, and he definitely feels like he's playing better. And even some of his, like Chan Gailey had him in Buffalo, had him in Miami, and told our Cameron Wolf that he feels like he is a different quarterback. We'll see. Because it's again, like if you played over 6-7 games, it's one thing. Let's see over 16 what happens. And I'm not going to sell fans a bill of goods on that, like, oh, he's going to be this great quarterback. I do think he'll be fun to watch, but sometimes that fun to watch could be like, it's that roller coaster. And I think, if that's, that'll be the interesting part to watch.
All right, Cakes. Well, I'll let you get to it. I know you got Ron Rivera coming up and a bunch of other projects you're working on. Tell everybody where they can find you, what you got coming up for the John Keim Report podcast.
Well, I had Charlie Cashley is going to be my next guest, so that'll be out later, like Thursday night, Friday morning, and then what I'm doing every week is a draft day memory. So I'm talking to various former Washington players about their memories from draft day, and I just had. I'll have Logan Paulson will be on soon to break down the draft and just kind of look ahead to that. So we got all that going on, and you can find this, the John Keim Report, Apple, Spotify, wherever podcasts can be found. And then, we are talking to Ron Rivera today, and we'll get an update on the off season and have some stories on that on ESPN.com.
All right, man. Thanks a lot. I'll be talking to you.
All right, Jonesy. Thanks.
See ya. Thanks so much to John Keim for joining me. Go check out his podcast if you are not already. His chats, this project he's doing with the draft day memories is pretty cool, and he always has great insight into Washington's football team and what's going on, where they're headed, and all those developments. You can read me at usatoday.com. Follow me on Twitter and Instagram @ByMikeJones. I will talk to you guys again next week. Hope you guys have a great one.